Hi, I'm Jay. I'm codependent. Somehow I thought this was going to be a 15-minute share. So now I have found out that I get to share my entire story. So strap in, it'll be about 10 hours. Luckily there's boundaries in this program, and I will not speak for 10 hours. I will give some kind of abbreviated version. Today, in this moment, I am of the opinion that my experience with program is unlearning a lifetime of isolation. When I was a young human, I was in a family of a mom and a dad and a brother, and I was the eldest, and I didn't really know this at the time, but upon lots and lots of discussion with therapists and a sponsor and a lot of reflection on my life with 20/20 hindsight as an adult, I've come to realize that I was a very emotional human being and a very sensitive human being. And I was brought up in a society that, for one reason or another, had decided that humans of my gender presentation need to not have emotions. And for better or for worse, my father was going to make sure that that was how I was raised. And this I label as unfortunate, because I had a lot of questions. I had a lot of feelings that I needed someone to not only contextualize and help me name, because it's only with language that I can understand, but also to guide me in effective ways to process and cope with those emotions. I didn't get a lot of that. What I did get was a father who would be at work long hours. When he got home, he would get changed, and all three of us would come and be with him while he changed and asked him questions, and he would give kind of short answers, and then he would want to go out into the living room, pour himself a beer or a whiskey and water, and nurse it extremely slowly over the evening while reading his paper, listening to music, and rocking in his rocking chair. So I got about 10 minutes of interaction per day. I also received the occasional weekend kicking a soccer ball back and forth, and maybe a family bike ride. My father, I came to find out later, had many reasons for his approach to life, but that was what I found. And so I very quickly learned that if I had questions, that was not the tree to bark up. My mother did a pretty good job of interacting in terms of homework, in terms of taking us to the park or the playground or whatnot. But had a difficult time with her own emotions and did not have much in the way of tools, because I've very quickly come to see that a lot of the problems in my life, and through meetings have discovered I am not alone, which is fantastic. A lot of this is generational. A lot of this is passed down from, our parents, which was passed down from their parents, which is passed down to their parents, all the way back to, the Mayflower or whatnot. Probably even before that. And so while I could get hugs, I couldn't really get tools. I remember trying to share with my brother, but he was younger and had less experience than I, so that was not the right tree to bark up. And I tried asking friends at school. My friends at school were being raised in the same, well, not the same, very similar circumstances to my own, so I didn't end up meeting anyone with tools that they could share either. And with no one else to turn to, I quickly discovered that I was the only person on the planet experiencing emotions the way I was experiencing them. The only person maybe who had feelings. And I've heard it said before, but it was such a thrill when I came to program and heard other people say this, because I had thoughts like, what if I'm the only real person in the world and everybody else is a robot or a simulation or an alien and this is a big experiment? Luckily, I've chosen to decide that that is not in fact the case, and there are in fact other humans in this universe. Thank you for being here, by the way. I tried to navigate life as the only person with emotions, and I found myself bullied. I found myself very, very lonely, and I found myself afraid to not just open up, but also just talk to other human beings because of all the reactions that I had gotten in the past. I didn't want more of that. So I turned inward. I suppose developed or encouraged a lot of imagination to sort of find a way to manage. I came to program following a hottie. We had gone on a few dates, and the hottie had said, I'm going to go to a meeting. Anyone can go to this meeting, or you can just, hang out for the hour and a half it'll take me to be in the meeting. And my brain quickly did a calculation. If I did not go to the meeting, then during that hour and a half, there was a chance that the hottie would meet someone else, fall madly in love, and abandon me, just like so many others in my past had abandoned me. So I elected to go to the meeting. And I had no idea what this meeting was going to be about, but I assumed it was going to be, like a professional meeting, some kind of Robert's Rules or some kind of boring speaker who speaks the whole time and everybody sits there and doodles and doesn't pay attention. Instead, what I found was 5 people sitting in a park next to a busy street, which I later found out was because the rent was cheap. And I was handed a piece of paper in one of those little plastic paper packets, and they told me at some point they'd ask somebody to read these, and then I would read them out loud for everybody. I have never asked, but I'm pretty sure that they decided to put the patterns and characteristics in the newcomer's hand for a very specific purpose, and there I was, reading the patterns and characteristics out loud, and about halfway down, my brain was like, where the hell did they get this list? Because I am every single thing on this list. Have they been watching me? Is this a CIA front? What's going on? And it was incredible. Because then I sat through this meeting listening to other people share, and they were sharing these incredible things that I had also experienced. And it was an epiphany. It was amazing. And so I started coming to program. But I came to program with the tool of isolation. I had learned that meetings were an excellent place, and so I was perfectly fine going to meetings. And I started hearing about these steps, and that working the steps was a very good idea. And I didn't really know much about them, but because the steps were a good idea and I was a good codependent / honors student, I was going to do the steps, and I was going to do a darn good job. And so I looked around, and I found a person who was actually at a lot of the meetings I was going to, so I figured this person must know a few things. And I said, so what about these steps? And this person said, well, you can get a sponsor, and explained what a sponsor was, and that was way intimidating. Or you can do a step study. And I said, oh, that's interesting. How does a step study happen? Well, at the end of the meeting where they say, are there any announcements? You say something along the lines of, I would like to start a step study. Anybody else want to start a step study? Come talk to me. And so I mustered up the courage, and I did that. And a good 10 people talked to me. So we started forming a step study. What I later found out a few meetings in was that the person in that step study with the most time had about 8 months. I had 6, and several of them had, weeks. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But as a result of that, by the time we got to step 3, we were down to about 5 people. By the time we were on step 4, we were down to 4. And by step 8, it was me and one other guy. The green workbook at that time was relatively new. And when I asked for others' experience, strength, and hope, a lot of people told me that they had experience with an outside literature book. It was much more direct in its prompts, but slightly less coda focused. And it helped. At step 5, it said, hey, it's time to share this with another human being. And at that moment, I said to myself, I better get a sponsor. So I called up a person, asked if they'd sponsor me. They said, sure. I said, okay, I'm on step 5. They said, oh, okay. I said, so can I read you my step 5? And this person said, okay. And so I read it. And then I think I called that person maybe 4 or 5 times after that. Because the shame of another person knowing all that stuff about me made me a little bit allergic to calling that person. Luckily, that person is still in program and a very caring person in my life. I'm glad I got to get past some of that. After I finished that step study, I was very thrilled, but I was also finding that in my life I was encountering new problems and was not sure what to do about those. And somebody suggested that I work the steps again. I said, oh, what an interesting idea. So I got myself a new sponsor and started working the steps directly with that person. And that was actually pretty nice. The way we did it was using the green workbook and just kind of answering the questions. And that was real nice. On Wednesdays, I would call and answer about half an hour's conversation worth of questions. So it would take 2 to 4 weeks to get through each step and tradition. And on Sundays, we'd get together for a little walk before a meeting and have a little talk just about life and stuff. And that was real nice. And that worked pretty well. And then I got to be about 7 years in, and I was at a conference, and I was now married, and I was having a blowout with the person I was married to. And one of the things that came up in the blowout was that I was being very codependent. in many ways, clingy, deferring, not really having opinions of my own. And something needed to be done. And interestingly enough, that blowout is actually one of the big miracles in my life, because that blowout led to me stepping out on a limb that I had not stepped out on, and that limb was making reach-out calls. I very much, as a result of my childhood of isolation, was really trying to do this step work all by myself. When I was in the step study, it was pretty much all by myself because the other person at that step study had basically the same amount of time I did. When I worked with my sponsor, it was better, but it was a little surfacey. But ultimately, I was really maintaining only one person who knew me in any depth in program. And in this moment, it was my sponsor. And so I needed answers, and I needed answers fast. And so I looked at the phone lists that I had in my journal, and I just went right down the line and I started calling because I needed somebody to help me. And the first person didn't answer, so I called the second person. The second person didn't answer, so I called the third person. All the way down the list. I got to maybe person 12 or 13 before somebody finally picked up the phone. And that person talked to me and helped me out a lot. And during that call, somebody called me back. So when I got off the phone with that first person, I got to call back the second person, and now I got to have a talk. And interestingly, throughout the rest of that day and the next day, I started receiving calls back because I had made a reach-out call. And I cried. There's actually a really incredible recording of me crying because another miracle that happened that same day was someone had dropped out of a speaker panel called something like From Newcomer to Old Timer. So there was somebody with like a year, there was me with 7 years, and there was 2 people who were there at the beginning. And a question would be asked, and each person would answer. And they say in this program that somewhere around 5 to 7 years, there's like this big aha. And there was a recording of me having it. And sometimes I listen to it, and I can't understand a word I am saying because I am bawling so hard. And like 4 people came up to me after the meeting and said, "Oh my gosh, I felt everything that you were putting out there." I was like, "But you couldn't understand it," and that didn't matter. And it was beautiful. And about that time, one of the people who I talked to had suggested a thing called, at the time, 3 steps in 30 days, which I think is now called the 30 questions or something. And that person had volunteered to work those questions with me. So I got to start doing it that way. And I got to go deeper than I had ever before. And it was wonderful. I don't know why I brought that up. I had a reason. Because as a result of doing that, I got to be deeper about myself to another person than I ever had before. And as part of that, I don't know if this is still the truth because I haven't seen the published version of this. It recommended a thing called the Power of 5. It was kind of explained in that the Power of 5 is like having 5 sponsors. And my brain and my experience told me that 5 sponsors was not a good idea. Because if I have 5 sponsors, then if one of my sponsors says I should not do a thing, I have 4 other people I can call until one of them says, yes, I should do a thing. And that maybe is not the best thing for me. But I have come to understand that I was misunderstanding it. The Power of 5 is not about having 5 sponsors. It's about having 5 people in my life who know me about as well as my sponsor does. I say this often to my sponsees, and it makes them sad every time. One of the many benefits of having the power of 5 is if my higher power were to take my sponsor out of my life for some reason, there are 4 other people who I would not have to catch up on who I am and where I am at in my life before they could be of service to me in the role of a sponsor. Another benefit is, and this was incredible when I found it out, it turns out we all have different experiences, even though we all have these common experiences, and we've all done recovery in all these different areas. And so it turns out that the person who I talked to who came to recovery as a married person and has, been in a marriage their whole time in recovery, they don't have a lot of tips for me in how to date as a recovering person, whereas somebody else might. A person who I reach out to who has experienced questioning their gender or their sexuality will have more to share with me than a person who has not done that work. And so the power of 5 gives me the opportunity to realize that 5 is just a suggestion. I can have more than that. And I can look in the rooms, even though I have a sponsor, for people who have things that I'm interested in learning more about and asking them for their experience, strength, and hope. And I really like it. I've been on a big reach out call kick, sharing about reach out calls a lot for the last month and a half, because I am out of a relationship of the romantic and sexual variety, in which I had stopped making reach out calls. I went to my home meeting, but because pandemic, I found out that I could actually text while in a meeting and scroll social media, and yikes, that was a hard lesson, but perhaps a necessary lesson, and I got to learn from that. And so I've been building up my power of 5 again. I've been I've been building up my reach out list of people, and I've been looking at how can I be a better friend, because I, as a result of not making my reach out calls, basically abandoned a lot of people that I consider to be very close friends with. And that makes me sad. I've been doing some amends around that, both as a self-amends and verbally. And I'm glad to have the tools to be able to do that. I am certainly a work in progress. I will always be finding new areas in which to grow. I have a lot to share. And in my early recovery, and by early here I'm talking like 5 to 8 years, I would have beaten myself up for walking away from program in the way I did. But today, I get to decide to reframe that as higher power needed me to see something that I was not yet seeing, so that I could grow and approach relationships differently, so that I can center my higher power, center myself, and then think about other people. No matter how much I want to bring them into my lives or be accepted into their lives or whatnot, Coda is very specific on higher power first, then ourselves, then other people, in varying degrees. Today I've had the same sponsor for a long time. It had been years when I went through my divorce. My sponsor saw me through that process. My sponsor saw me through me realizing that I had childhood, I had the symptoms of a person who had experienced childhood sexual abuse. I have memories of childhood physical abuse, lots of neglect, all these things, and my sponsor has been there through all of it, and I am very grateful for that. We've gotten to the point where most of the time my sponsor and I are just kind of rapping. Hey, how you doing? I'm good, how are you? And during those calls, at the end of those calls, the end of the call is usually, let me know when you've got any writing to read to me, which I take to mean two things. Hey, you didn't read anything to me today, and it's cool. When you have something deeper to talk about, I will be here just as much as I have been in the past. And it's beautiful. Yeah. Today I get to sponsor other people, and it's an amazing experience because my sponsees bring me things that either I'm currently dealing with in one way or another, or that, and I don't know this when it's happening, but I know this because of past experience, I'm about to have to deal with. Sometimes my higher power is getting me ready through conversation for something that's coming up in the very near future. And it's wonderful. I get to love my sponsees instead of trying to control them, which frankly is the thing I was afraid of with the idea of getting a sponsor in the first place. I was going to get a sponsor, my sponsor was going to try and tell me what to do and not love me, which is what my dad did, and that's not what I wanted. Instead, I get love and the occasional suggestion, but most of the time these days, I basically say, okay, I just read you this thing, this is what I think I should be doing. And my sponsor says, yes, may I also suggest this little thing, which is usually prayer, meditation, checking in with higher power. I should probably look into that pattern. Not to should on myself, but I do think it's a good idea. And it's fantastic because in early program I was trying to sponsor myself, but it was let's metaphor real quick. Starship Enterprise, somebody has to be at the helm, being the captain, saying what to do. I'd be hiding in my room and occasionally running up to the front of the ship, don't hit that asteroid, okay, good, and back to my room. And instead, as a result of the 30th anniversary World Conference, it occurred to me that I get to be the captain of my life with my higher power. Okay, wait, is my higher power the captain and I'm the first officer? Never mind. Anyway, at that conference, somebody shared about using the Blue Book as the recipe for working the steps, and that the book itself, line by line, says, do this, ask yourself this question, watch out for this thing. And I started doing it that way, and I didn't know anyone in my area who had done it that way, because I had just come back from this conference in Arizona, and there were a couple other people from the area who were at the conference with me, but nobody had experience with this. And I realized I can decide what questions to ask myself. I can assign myself writing. I can grow based on my own questions and read them to my sponsor. And my sponsor would be like, yeah, that was a great question. Maybe I should answer that. Huh. All right, thank you for sharing. And would have feedback sometimes, but it was fantastic. And suddenly, I was able to feel like my sponsorship relationship was a partnership. And now I get to talk about that with my sponsees. This is a partnership. I don't work the steps for you. You work the steps for you. I get to maybe suggest from my own experience, strength, and hope times where I've done a thing that you're considering that was not a good idea for me. If you ask that question, I can also just grin at you and wait for it to happen, because maybe that's what higher power needs. I don't know. And That's 30 minutes, really. I need to wrap up. It would be a good idea for me to wrap up. This is a miracle program. I am so glad to have been here. I am so glad to get to keep being here. We've been in a pandemic. We all of a sudden switched to Zoom, and we kept doing this work. And now I'm in meetings with people who are taking their 1-year chip and don't know this any other way. And it's incredible to me, because the message of Coda, the message of experience, strength, and hope, the power of this program persists. I miss hugs, but apparently the hugs are an important thing, but aren't the program. But I can still hug all of you for being here virtually. Here it comes. Thank you so much. And thank you for letting me share.